And we are live with Ray Ankrum, principal of the Riverhead Charter School, our superintendent, not principal. What am I saying? Let's promote you, man, to where you at.
Little upgrade.
Right. Superintendent. When I met you, you were the principal of the school there in Riverhead. Thanks for joining me, Ray. Appreciate it.
Not a problem, bro.
So listen, you were somebody I reached out to because I am having a moment where I'm really tired. As a Black male who does education advocacy and activism and thinking and just generally wanting to be involved because it's what I think I can contribute to the field in terms of helping anybody else, any other parent that has ever felt like they were insufficient and weren't enough and didn't have enough of the knowledge and the education, the credentials, the background to participate in education fully, like we do. That's really why I come to this, but I always encounter some sort of problem, or I'm helping somebody else with the problem that are particular and specific to being a Black male in this field, specific to being, in some cases, a Black father or a Black principal or a Black advocate or advocacy person or a Black policymaker. It comes back oftentimes on you. The frame that I want to give to our conversation comes from W.B. Du Bois' Soul of Black Folks. And he says, between me and the other world, there is an ever and unmasked question, unmasked by some through feelings of delicacy, by others through the difficulty of rightly framing it, all nevertheless flutter around it. How does it feel to be a problem? And that is really, what this show is about. At the outset, I want to tell you a couple of things that you already know for the frame of this discussion so that people watching and listening could know part of the frame. You as a Black superintendent of a charter school and an educator and principal are somewhat of a very small minority within the field of education. And just the stats for people listening or watching, more than half of American students are members of racial subgroups that aren't white, but about 78% of public school principals are white, which also mirrors the teaching force, which is about 80% white. And in places like where I live in Minnesota, it's like 96% white. Nationwide, 2% of public school teachers are Black males. Only 2% of Hispanic males are Hispanic males. If you are a school board member, which controls the way that schools and districts run in the United States, you are most likely to be white, wealthy, and Republican. That's from a study that I can send anybody.
There's nothing wrong with the last part.
Well, whatever, white, wealthy, and raised a Republican, so he's gonna be okay with that part of it. Principals of color, 8.9% are Hispanic, 10% are Black. And those who are principals, the Black principals that we do have, tend to be in urban districts more than in rural town or suburban counterparts. They also tend to be concentrated in very high poverty schools. So if you have a school that is 70% or more students eligible for free and reduced price lunch, 60% of those teachers are white, which is less than the national average, and 21% are Black. So, you have a higher, as teachers and principals, you have a higher chance of being in schools that have more students who are poor and more issues to deal with. And finally, on this part, charter schools tend to be a little bit more diverse than traditional district schools. When it comes to Black folks, I think it's a significant difference in the number percentage that you have in charter schools versus traditional schools. So then the last part of this is about fathers. In a recent Eight Black Hands podcast, we were talking about Black male erasure. And one piece of that is like, when people think about the positive identity of being a father, of fatherhood, that's not part of the Black male identity. For some reason, it's not part of our identity. So we're all dads. And Dr. Charles Cole asked us, how do you guys feel as fathers, right? He put that on the table. And it was kind of weird because we were like, well, no one really ever asks us that as part of our identity. Anyways, that's the setup for today. How does it feel to be a problem? We're in education where we are extreme minority, where we will encounter problems that are specific to us, our real identities, and it's almost as if people don't see us even when we do show up. So, I'll start out with you, Ray, like with the question around, have you ever felt like being Black and being male, the combination of those two things, put your career at risk, your career in education specifically at risk?
All the time, man. Like, being over 6 feet and working with white women, man, it's like you're a constant threat. And it's not everybody, but there's some that you really can't have a conversation with because they get in their feelings or whatever, and they really don't want to talk about the issues. There's a lot of deep rooted things that come up when you have these types of conversations. But I've always felt like a danger. I started my career working in Baltimore City Public Schools, and the school that I worked at initially was predominantly African American. The principal was African American, and the majority of the teachers that were there were African American as well. And that comes with its own set of problems. But I never felt like there wasn't a holding area, like
Mm-hmm.
or like a level of concern that you could have for kids without feeling judged about the kids.
So when you, so specifically, like when you think about how being Black and being male has been an issue in your career in education,
Yeah.
How has it shown up with staff? Is it different with staff or with advocates or other professionals or parents, or is it kind of general the same amongst them?
Nah, bro. Like it's, like I'll explain to you my initial encounters in Riverhead. So like when I took over my school, the staff was 100% white. The student population was about 90% African American and Latino at that point. No. Actually, it wasn't. It was lower. It was about 75% African American and Latino. And so the population of the students did not match the population of the staff. And so my first question was like, yo, how is there any kind of equity that's happening here? Like, why are these kids not seeing anybody that looks like them to motivate them? And I just had a real problem with it. And so the majority of the staff, which was white, had a problem with me having the problem that I had, even though when you think about it, like anybody that walked into that situation would have a problem with it. It's like, yo, what the hell? Like, I understand that I'm in the suburbs, but Jesus Christ, like these kids, these are Black and Latino kids. Where is the Black and Latino staff? It was tough, man. I had parents coming for my neck, bro. They created a website, Fire Ray Ankrum. It was all kinds of things going on out here, man. Just it felt like pre-Brown, and like the white folks didn't really want to integrate. They didn't want Black staff members. They didn't want they didn't want that voice. And thinking about it, bro, I probably spurred a lot of white administrator career aspirations because they looking at me like, hey, if he can do it, then I should be going to be a principal as well because I can do it too. Not thinking about my skill set, but thinking that, all right, well, because he's Black and he's a principal, then I can be white and be a principal.
Because obviously, if you can do it and you're Black, that means, of course, a superior person could do it because you're white. Interestingly enough, you mentioned how somebody like creates a website, a whole ass website on like, that you should be fired and whatnot. That actually, we're laughing about it, but for people listening and watching, I just want you to know that this isn't a rare situation when you're us. I have generally become somebody who's a go-to person when you're encountering one of these situations because I've had it happen so much. And you make the wrong vote, the wrong decision, a wrong professional use of your professional authority or power in any way, shape, or form. And I don't mean wrong as in it really is wrong. I mean wrong as in they think it's wrong or they don't like the outcome of your decision. And they have at they have a skill set and an arsenal of ways to bring to smear you, to bring a smear to you and call your integrity into question. And it happens at every level. Happens at the parent level, white parents, dealing with Black school staff, white staff dealing with Black school leaders. Just in general, they have their ways. This is risky business. We're in risky business just to assert ourselves and positively participate in education.
Bro, and the smear is so real, man. Like for example, you Google my name right now, that shit is ugly because of things that have occurred in my career. Like, I mean, I stand firm in the things and the decisions that I've made, but you know, people really go after you, from unions to teachers to lawyers that they hire when the unions can't get it done. And you know, you're right about the personal smear campaign that occurs, because yo, these folks will go to any ends in order to see you fail, or in order to see you like not be able to pick yourself back up once you leave a job.
Yeah, and that, I mean, think about that right there too. We can talk about it as if it's just people giving you a hard time, you know, but in general, it's more than that, because as a Black man, as a father, as somebody with a family, as somebody who's having to provide for your family, you realize that these type of attacks aren't just about the one issue that's on the table at that moment. They're actually trying to steal from you your ability to have a career in some ways. Like, you know, they're taking money off of your out of your house and food off of your table just because they're so cheap about what they want to get done politically in that moment, right? They don't care about all the rest of it. And you know, so you're a dad, you know, like I'm a father. I think we're both good fathers. We think about this as deeply as intellectual beings and as you know, thinking people. But I don't think anybody shares with us the idea of what it's like to have the dominant culture come for you in that way, and then look at your children and look at your family and look at your household and think to yourself, damn, I could be impacting what my kids have in life just because I take stands that I think are right.
Bro, yo, that's the one of the realest things that I've heard you say. And for me, being a thinking man, like I always think, and to use Cole's analogy, it's like I always think in a manner that's like, this can all be taken away from me. And so I'm always trying to plan ahead in terms of like, what's my next move? And so for me, I don't spend frivolously on things, because I know that at any given point, these white folks could come on my neck, and like, I may not be in the fortunate position that I'm in. And so therefore I must have a nest egg. So if I have to take my kid out of a school to put them in another school, or to do all of the things that Black folks have to do in order to maneuver when you're in positions like this, I mean, those are all things that I think about in terms of like, what's my next move or what's my next step, because you got to think ahead.
Yeah. And you're thinking on different levels. You're thinking as a worker, like a professional in your field. You're thinking like a father who has to provide for your children and for your household. You're thinking like somebody who has to be strategic about doing something for your people. Like if we wake up every morning and we think to ourselves, the reason that I am doing this is because I know that I can correct some things in the world for our people, and people who came before me did their job. I need to do part of my job, and this is what I can do. The moment that you become that type of educational radical, that type of person who's going to be an activist or whatnot, you accept the fact on that day that you're going to be a target at some point. It's going to happen multiple times. You and I are having this conversation right now for two reasons. Number one, on the recent A Black Hands podcast, it came up, this thing around blackmail erasure, right? And, you know, I don't think it was well defined enough. A couple of people asked me about it later. In the moment, I was thinking about how the Black male identity doesn't include good fatherhood as part of our identity, even though it is part of our identity. Like we have it. People don't think of us that way. But it shows up in other ways in the work that we do. Like we aren't capable leaders in education. So there's always a question about whether or not we're qualified enough or competent enough to do whatever role it is that we're doing. We're not involved parents, right? Even though statistics tell us overwhelming. First of all, the majority, people listening, get this straight. The majority of Black children are not fatherlessness. They're not living in fatherlessness. So let's just get the record straight. Statistically speaking, it's inaccurate to keep pushing this myth around the missing Black father, because it's just, I can send you studies. If you don't believe me, I won't cite them right now, but if you want them, I can send them to you. But you know, the Black male erasure is you're not present. You're not involved. You're not doing your job. You're not capable, qualified. You're not experts on your children. There's a way to go.
We already know that's
That's a
crazy.
big one, isn't it?
Yeah,
Like you go sit
yeah,
with you're sitting there and you know your child very well and you feel very prepared and you feel reasonably intelligent and you're sitting with somebody who is too young to tell you anything, but they have a position within schools and staff and whatnot, and they want to white splain things to you, and you kind of just shake your head and say, Lord, just let me get out of this. You know, I need to make a run to Arby's or something after this or whatever. Let me just like tell this person what they need to hear so I can get out of, you know, out of her
yeah.
dumbass class. But you know, we're not experts on our children. And here's my favorite one. This is the one that I think is more that I get the most. And I see other people like Shavar Jeffries, and I could just keep going down a list of people get too. When you're in advocacy in reform, education reform, there's a constant drumbeat from middle-aged white people who are living on pensions or on the wealth of divorces that they've had, who come at you saying that the only reason that you're saying the stuff that you're saying and you care about education reform the way that you do is because you're being paid.
Yeah.
Right. And then they tar you with one of several archetypes. You're either the shill, the pimp, the greedy, like money grubber. In some way, you are lacking virtue, and that is the only reason why you would at all think that there should be a need for Black families to have choices in education,
Wow.
to have options. Like the only reason you would possibly be saying this and doing this is because some millionaire brought you into a laboratory and took out your brain and inserted a different brain in your head and made you somehow beholden to this agenda. Anyways, I'm going on and on and on, but I think this needs to be said, right?
No, it's important. It's important. But so, all right. So when we look at like Black families in general, right? A lot of schools are built on the backs of the white family construct, and so what that means is that, you know, you'll usually have like a white father who works and a black I'm sorry, a white father that works and a white mother that's able to be involved. And so the involvement schedule is based off of this white woman who does not work, who's a stay-at-home mom, and is able to come to the school at all different times in order to participate in that particular school schedule volunteer-wise. Whereas then a Black family is judged off of not being able to participate and volunteer during those times in which white folks are volunteering. But that's due to the fact that, you know, there's all kinds of other structures that are put in place that don't allow folks to come in and volunteer during those times. And so a really good school is going to meet all parents where they are to get that level of involvement, because, you know, when you're involved in your kids' education, then your kids are going to do better. But we don't look at it that way, you know, and I think that's unfortunate.
Well, we don't have ways to track how people are involved either. We talk about involved, but we're not specific, and we make assumptions about how people should be involved.
Absolutely.
Like what they should be doing. Are they reading in the home? You don't know.
Right.
You can guess, but you don't know. And if you're guessing about a middle-class white person, I bet you're going to guess that they do, even when they don't. And when you're guessing about a Black person, especially a Black male, you're going to guess that they don't, even when they do. Right.
Yep.
It's what we call bias. And it's so endemic into the work that we do that it's like choking. It's hard to like think about how you beat it, how you get out of it without being bitter and without being angry. And to be very honest with you, I'm on the verge of being bitter. Right. Right now, I mean, and I'm being real with my audience. I'm being real with people that are listening and watching right now. I'm being real with you in telling you that even as of right now, today, I continue to have situations that I have to spend time, effort, energy fighting because of people coming for me in ways that are behind the scenes, that are meant only to smear me or take me out of the game. And my decision to stay in this work has to be a decision based around the fact that I'm going to accept that that's going to happen. What do you think about like us telling other people to get into this work, to get into the field in some way, shape, or form, especially Black males?
Man, that's a dangerous question right there, because like, you know, with the majority of people that you try to encourage to get into this work, you love them. And so you want to set them up, you know, you want to set them up for success. And sometimes, you know, me saying to one of my Black male counterparts, man, you need to teach, or man, you need to lead a school, or man, you need to do this, is kind of irresponsible, because like I'm not, you know, especially if I'm not telling them or giving them the real as to like the things that they may encounter by accepting this kind of work, man. This shit is tough. It's like
Yeah.
you coming, it's all different angles of folks that are coming at you. You know, it's like from the state level to sometimes the federal level when you're not getting the support from Secretary of Education that you should be getting, you know, and it's just like it's all different angles that that things are coming at you from. But for me, I mean, I think that we need to have more representation of Black males specifically in education. I feel like, you know, for an upcoming youth to see a Black male in a position of leadership, it gives them that aspiration to know that, hey, I can do and be anything that I want to be, because I'm seeing someone emulate the things that I didn't think would necessarily be in my will or necessarily be in my foreseeable future in terms of things that I can accomplish.
I mean,
So
but how do you think we prepare them though? Not just for, there's one way to be prepared to be a father. There's another way to be prepared to be a principal or teacher, whatever you're going to be. But the part of the preparation that we have to deal with that no one else has to deal with is also, on top of all of that, this is what you might encounter as a Black male in this field at all levels.
Yeah.
No matter what level. There are a set of things that you're going to have to encounter that are specific to your gender and your race. And I don't know what type of preparation you give to people for that doesn't scare them out of the field.
Yeah, but I mean, but you owe it to them to be honest to them about it, though. You know, like some of the things that I encountered when I first got into education, man, it's like when I went to, you know, and I've said this on 8 Black Hands before, when I went to my first initial job fair, it's like I had 10 offers before I even walked in the door because I was a Black male and I looked like I could keep kids in check. They didn't look at my resume. They didn't see at the fact that potentially this cat could be a scholar and whatnot, you know, and this cat can enrich the minds of students. It was looked upon as he can keep these kids in check. And so already that's negative.
Yeah.
You know,
I
so
mean,
if you walk into a situation like that and like people looking at you like, damn, well, this is going to be the security guard when you have a college degree, it's like, I don't know if I would be wanting to come into that.
Yeah, you're going to be the dean of behavior, even though you have a whole ass class to teach. Right. Like, so you're going to be teaching a class as a tall Black man who's trying to teach kids just like anybody else. And you're going to have like 8 teachers trying to send you students to give them a talk.
Happen all the time, man. Happen all the time. I mean, you know, but then, you know, those are some of the things that you take on and being an educator, man. It's like, yo, do you want these kids roaming the hallways and something could happen to them, or you want them, you know, to be suspended or whatever because of these no nonsense policies that don't make sense or whatever? Or are you going to bring them into the class and set them up and make sure they're doing the work for the teacher, the white teacher down the hall that put them out? I mean, for me, it makes it easier for me to take them and bring them into my class and make sure that they're doing what they need to do. For others, I don't know if that's the same.
I mean, yeah. So if you have the time, yeah, you could do it. You could be the dean of education or whatnot, but in the back of your mind, it's still burning you up that you're being put in that role when you're a thinking person who has
you paid the same money.
You get paid the same money, but you have pedagogical insight like anybody else, right?
Yes.
Like you got a whole ass class to teach, and still because of that you added something different when you said, you know, I'm 6, whatever, you know, like, you know, as a tall Black man, you add something different. You mentioned something just a minute ago, though, that I think goes to, like, I think you're more prepared if you're an educator, a Black male educator, principal, whatever. I think you're more prepared for education, the game, than anybody else is in our groups. Because if you're a Black father, like you just said, who your work schedule is going to most likely put you in the situation where you're going to come to fewer things. And it might be that your wife or significant other who is helping you with your child, as you know, as a team, is going to take on more of that. So then you have the look of being absent, right?
Yeah.
I don't think Black fathers, though, are ready. When they do show up, there's this sense of, like, for me, at least I could speak for myself, there was a sense of, like, especially when I was a young father, like, I'm here. Like, I'm doing something, like, you know, this is good. And then you get this sense of, like, you're expecting people to be like, yeah, you're here, good, you know, type of thing. And you don't get that in a lot of cases. You're like, you get the opposite. You get kind of like, you know, let me help you, let me educate you on how you should be type of thing. And if you're a parent with any type of pride about yourself, that's not going to work, right?
Not at all. Not at all.
And no one wrote the book. There is no How to Be a Black Male and Not Be a Problem book for any of us. Again, I want to talk about the different levels we be in, because I've seen it at all levels: advocacy, educational leadership, school building leadership, as a teacher, as a parent, as an advocate, person who advocates nationally on these issues in any one of these levels. I don't care what your background is, what your education is, how much money you have, what you have. At the end of the day, somebody is going to come for you when you make a wrong decision, one that they don't like, and they're going to try to niggerize you. Basically, let me just be real. That's what the process is. I don't think we should mince words. Over time, America has been in the constant process of niggerizing different people. And when it's not you, it's going to be somebody else at some point. They're going to niggerize you because you're gay. They're going to niggerize you because you're a woman. They're going to niggerize you but let's just say the process that I'm talking about, and that sounds like an ugly word and process. I don't care, because it's an ugly situation that happens constantly. We were the original marginalized, right? And then when our big marginalization ended with slavery, they found ways to marginalize other people. Like, they perfected it with us. We were the trial case. And now there is a way to marginalize everybody. And we say marginalize, but I really think we should say niggerize when it comes to what they do to us. Because in the moment that you are a Black male who's qualified and educated to do what you're doing, and you're looking in the face of a white person, often who's a middle-aged white woman with privilege, who is telling you that somehow your motives are bad, your virtues are bad, your qualifications or whatever, and just let me educate you. That is a moment of niggerization. That is the point of sale of niggerization. And you could probably hear it in my voice. I'm tired of dealing with it. I am just tired of helping other people deal with it. I'm tired of seeing it.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that that's probably the pinnacle of why things are occurring the way that they're occurring now. But so when you talk about just like the what did you say?
Niggerization, brother.
Niggerization of Black folks. We'd be remiss to not talk about the American Indians and how they were niggerized before us. But secondly, man, it brings me to an encounter that I had during a Black History Month program, when a group of white parents came up to me and was like, man, when are we going to have a White History Month program?
That's my favorite one. That's a special kind of stupid.
Right. So fortunately for me, I had white staff members that came over and like immediately addressed the situation. And they addressed it from the point of like, every month, every minute you breathe is White History Month, and so I like how they handled it. So I didn't really have to like come out of pocket and say what I wanted to say, because they did it like in a professional way. But a lot of times we're put in these positions to where we're having to respond to racist shit, and they're expecting for us to be tactful about responding to these things, and not all the time can you be that way. There'd be a lot of times where I'd be like, man, this job is not that important to the point to where I'm going to sacrifice who I am as a person to let you get away with saying some of the things you say. So, I mean, man, we need to have like, yeah, man, it's wild in education, bro.
I mean, what you just said too, the expectation that you're going to be tactful in the face of something that you know for a fact is not just. It's not right for them to do that to you. If you are tactful in that moment, you feel bad about it in some ways, because you feel like, I'm being a slave.
Yes.
Like, I'm in a situation where I know for sure that my response should be full fire. I should torch them like a dragon. Right now, I should just flame should come out my mouth right now. And I'm not going to do it because job, career, jail, like there's always a reason to not do the right thing in that moment.
Jail is definitely always at the forefront of my thoughts, because I realize who I am as a Black man, that, anybody could, any Karen can get on the phone and make a call, and then the next thing you know, I'm seen, regardless of whatever position I have, I'm seen as being the aggressor, because that's how society has portrayed me to be. And so then therefore, my second call is to a lawyer, to where now I have to spend money that I shouldn't have had to spend in the first place in order to clear my name and get things right. So man, this system is not set up for us, man.
No. So David McGuire, who's who folks to this show know as a friend of this show and a friend of ours, who is a Black school leader in Indianapolis. David says they try to pigeonhole us in roles, but we have to show them we teach our Black asses off. Again, you're an intellectual being. We have to keep pushing that you're a pedagogical being. You're not a dean of behavior unless that's actually your title, right? Yeah. Roberta Madison says, and we niggerize ourselves and call it love. Let's encourage one another not to call one another nigga. Not nigger, but nigga. Let's just be clear about the spelling of these words here. It's never a good thing, which I agree with you, Roberta. We can do a whole ass show. I think Ray and I have had a conversation about the importance of culture, the messages that culture sends to our young, the ones that they absorb that could be wrong. But in this discussion, I want to stick with, because there's always a, what about black on black crime, when you're trying to talk about police problems, right? There's always a, what about the bad people amongst you who are not getting it right, when we talk about the systemic ways in which we're being niggerized by the dominant society. Tashir Kim Cosby Thomas says, I want to be able to tell the truth without retribution. And that isn't that like,
gonna happen?
You don't think that's ever going to happen?
Nah, in a perfect world, sure, but like in the world that we live in, absolutely not. If you you tell the truth about what's going on in these schools, if you read a lot of these articles, you're pseudonyms in terms of like, I don't want to disclose my real name with regards to me talking about this, because I'm scared that some folks may come for my livelihood, or some things may happen on the back end or whatever, and you always looking over your shoulders, because it's like, all right, if you tell the truth about something, then these folks eventually are going to come for you in some way or form. You can't. So it's like, if you are truthful about something that occurs and it deals with like race and education, then you always have to walk on eggshells, and you can never make a mistake ever again.
I mean, but if you're that careful, how effective for your people can you be? I mean, there's some radical truths that we have to tell if we are good advocates and activists. There's some things we have to say that make people uncomfortable. Like we should be in the uncomfortable business, especially in education, right?
Yeah.
Right. So it's almost like the system is trying to groom you to be complicit before you even get into the role, to not be radical. Like they don't want you to be radical and say the real thing. They want you walking into a school saying, none of y'all know how to teach.
Yeah.
I've been in all your classrooms. You can't manage a classroom. You whatever. Even if that's true, you're not supposed to jump in and be that bold about what you say. I mean, how you get the question underneath all that is, how useful can you really be to your people if you're going to be walking on eggshells all the time?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. But for me, man, when I was in that classroom, listen, don't come to me and ask me honest questions if you don't want honest answers. So if you're coming to me like, oh, how can I get better? Well, first you need to be able to do this. Or second, you need to come and watch other people teach, especially if I'm talking to like my white colleagues about how to teach black kids, because a lot of them don't know, and they'll try to scapegoat the kid, try to make it seem like it's a behavior issue or a parent issue, or it's every other issue besides the fact that I can't teach these kids issue.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, who wants to admit that ever? But we're supposed to admit it when it's us. They're not supposed to admit it when it's them. I want to just quickly share my screen here and say, I wrote about this. Actually, when was this? This was 2 years ago. I wrote about this, article or a piece that I wrote called, "If you want more black males in education, stop dragging the ones who are already here when they disagree with your whack ass." Right. And I want people to read this and check it out, because I am basically telling the story in this of somebody that you and I think know in common, who couldn't be more lovable, peaceful, gentle, educated black man, just the sweetest person that who doesn't get involved in a lot of crazy stuff. And when they didn't like the fact that he had worked with TFA, they came at him in ways that were material. They cost him money, contracts, whatever. They ruined his standing in a state where he was doing good work. And, he ended up going into other work because it just wasn't worth it. And I thought to myself, what a loss. What a loss when you have a gang of white women who got lots of time on their hand, what I call basic blogging Becky in this piece that I wrote, and they just latch on to you. And this is why I exist in blog world and Twitter world, is because there are black people trying to do good work, and they're constantly got the piranhas, the social piranhas nipping at their heels, trying to get them out of the positions that they're in if they don't like your decisions. And that's what they did to him. In one part of this, I wrote, I could stop writing this now and call the first 10 Black men in my phone who have anything to do with education and collect a series of stories in which they are targets of white women who harness their social privilege and positional power to make their opinions material. And that I actually feel still today, and this is why I'm so frustrated. This was a couple years ago. I could have wrote this 2 years before that and 8 years before that, when I had my first incidents of this, it was in 2006 or 7, and have had multiple incidents of it since. And I don't think we should just live with the fact that this is the problem that you live with if you're going to be Black, male, and want to be in education in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, no, I agree with you wholeheartedly. But I mean, to I guess push back. What are you saying to, so if I'm in a majority, if I'm a African American, if I'm a Black superintendent and I'm in a majority white school district, and then I'm feeling the internal pressures to put out a message on Black Lives Matters, but I have parents that are coming at me saying, hey, blue lives, and there's no blue lives, but blue lives matter and all lives matter. How do you then address that situation? Because it's like the internal conflict part of you is going to say, well, damn, Black lives have not ever mattered. So let me go ahead and take that front. But if you take that front, the first mistake that you make, they're going to get your ass out.
Yeah, I think the matter is a weird diversion from the truth, like from what we should be saying. Black lives matter, all lives matter, this should matter, that should matter, matter is matter, whatever. That's all distraction. That's all stuff that only lives in language. Everything that we're talking about has to do with power. Right. Who has it? Who doesn't? Who wants it? Who's going to give it up? What can they use it for? And when you talk about the power that people have in the United States to determine what they learn, where they learn, how they learn, what they can do, how they can move, where they can buy houses, where they could buy cars, there is no need to have a conversation about all lives or this lies or that lies, because the data tells us the truth from lies, right? And the data tells us straight up that we are in a position of needing more power, Absolutely. Right, to determine our lives. And there is another group who has more power than us that consistently use it. And they need to either have less power or we need to match their energy and their power. And that's the whole fight. I don't care what else we're talking about in education, in social justice, in racism, in politics, or whatever. That is the only thing we're ever talking about. Power, who has it, who wants it, and how are we going to make sure that it's even? Because if it's not even, we're in a fight until it's even.
Bro, and they will do everything that they can in order to prevent you from having power.
That is so true. I mean, that actually is, let's not act like it's not in their best interest to do that, though.
Yeah.
Right? Like people act within their best interest. It is in their best interest to maintain power.
Yeah. So when you start seeing shit like voter suppression, and you start seeing things, we talk about this on our podcast. When you start seeing voter suppression, you start seeing lines wrapped around the corner. Perfect example of what's happening in Georgia. When you start seeing 100 go from 160 polling places to 80 polling places, you know that there's going to be a problem. You know that Black folks aren't going to be able to get out and vote the way that they should be able to vote or whatever. And it's like, what, when you got Supreme Court justices that are gutting voting rights or whatever, like how the hell can you navigate through that? This system is so set up for us to fail, bro. It's like, yo, how do you then coach somebody up to not fail?
I mean, in what you just mentioned, Dr. Howard Fuller told me that in Milwaukee, they went from 100 polling locations to 5. And they still held the election without any special considerations in the middle of a pandemic, right? There's an election in Wisconsin. And Milwaukee happens to be the blackest part of Wisconsin. I don't know how well people know Wisconsin, but Milwaukee is the blackest part of Wisconsin. So you go from 100 voting sites and polling sites down to 5 in the blackest part of a very white state. And again, what's the power dynamic there? Who has the power? Who doesn't? Who wants it? Who needs it? How is it going to be equal and traded? There's not an area of life activity where we are not facing that. I will say that in education, I think if we keep coming back to that, that is a place where we feel like we should have to deal with the least, because it's supposed to be such a progressive field, right?
Yeah.
A lot of people you're talking about, that I'm talking about, that you interact with, they're supposed to be progressive people.
Yeah.
I mean, they voted for Obama, Ray.
Listen, you know, I voted for Obama too, reluctantly, but I was having a
Stop it. Just stop it, man.
I was having this conversation with someone the other day, and we were talking about just like his legislation, like Obamacare, for example, right? So Obamacare was like a landmark legislation, probably one of the best legislation pieces of all time, in the sense that it worked for the poor, right? A lot of these policies that we're seeing under 45, and a lot of these policies that we see under the majority of presidents, work for the middle class, and they work for the upper class of folks, right? This legislation that was passed worked for the poor, and I've never seen anything like it. And so that's why, you know, he gets the ultimate amount of respect for me, because, you know, it worked in the sense that, you know, you're giving insurance to people that would have never been able to get it. I'm admirable for that. There's other things that he's done that we could do another show about that I'm pretty pissed off with, but that I'm cool with.
Well, I mean, think about it. Like, so he's a black man. He becomes the president. He's the ultimate example of some of what we're talking about right now, because the attempt to niggerize Obama started on the day that he started in office. I mean, basically, members of Congress said, we'll make sure he never gets anything passed, that he's not successful. They cheered for his, they pined for his failure. They wanted him to fail as an American president, first black American president. And they did spend all that time trying to block every single thing that he ever did and attempted. You know, we have the whole tan suit example, right? Like, oh my God, I can't believe the president wore a tan suit. And look what we're dealing with now. And they're all mum about that nonsense that we have going on. Completely mum. It's not a problem. Knowing that if we do the Obama test, if Obama had done any of what we're seeing people do right now, in the presidency, he would have been impeached. But in education, he did all this stuff, all this reform stuff, you know, made it easier to start and build charter schools, alternative pathways in education, basically trying to throw a safety raft to black people and brown people living in education deserts, all that he could possibly could.
He doesn't get the credit. He doesn't get the credit that he deserves.
Doesn't get credit
at all.
And actually, you know, it was a change in the reform movement, because up until that point, conservatives were very pro-reform in education on almost everything. And the moment that a black president started pitching any of that stuff, it became an issue. Absolutely. Right. And they started turning on it. And you know, teachers unions and the National League of White Public Employees that they represent actually had a hard time with him for 8 years, because he was the most popular black official, black person in America. To attack him on anything was hard. So so they had to just live with it for all those years. They did a good job of transferring all their hate to Arnie Duncan.
That and to Hillary.
And to Hillary, but they gave Duncan, like, he became an especially better target because he was in control of education. He was a proxy for Obama, but he wasn't Obama. So it wasn't like beating up on Obama. So, but the moment that, what's that?
He's a good dude.
Arnie's a good dude. Arnie's a great dude. And the moment though that Obama was gone, it became everybody's best dream, because on the right, they could start reversing everything that Obama put into place, including some of the schools and some of the stuff on school reform. But on the left, now they have Betsy DeVos and Donald Trump, which is a gift to them, because now they can just whip us on all the reforms just by tagging it to a very unpopular president and Secretary of Ed, at least for the left.
Well, don't let Joe escape this conversation, because he's doing a real good job at doing what he's doing. Joe Biden is.
You mean the sidestepping on the issues? Yeah. I mean, you know, this is another thing about power. Who has it right now? Anybody running for president or leader of the free world should be talking strongly about what we're going to do to make sure that every kid in America gets a great education and comes out the other end capable of getting a good job, a house, a vehicle, or whatever it is they want for a meaningful life. And what we are seeing is pandering, not to parents, not to students, not to the real needs and interests and issues of communities, but to public employees unions on one side, and to people who have dreams and illusions of completely ending government on the other side, right? So it's a pander fest right now that has nothing to do with us. We're just kind of in the middle of it. You know, it's what we used to say in the 80s or the 90s, it's your world. I'm just a squirrel trying to get a nut. Well, I mean, that is what we used to say. Well, I don't know. Some of us used to say that in the 80s and 90s, you know. And actually, you know, actually, like right now, where we are, it feels that way often. Like we're just trying to get the table scraps off the Lord's table, and it's so messed up. I feel like we wide ranged here, like we zoomed out, but if we zoom back in, and we talk just amongst ourselves, Black males who want to do something positive in education, either as a professional, an educator, a community member, a parent, or whatever. What do you think it is that what are the baby steps we take to start kind of like a Black male movement for our children?
So first and foremost, man, we got to show up. We got to come into these spaces and act like we own the place, man, and not like, you know, like is it okay for us to be here or whatever? Like, hell yeah, it's okay for us to be here. We have every right to be here. This is our space. These are our babies. So first and foremost, we got to come in and we got to act like we own the place, man. We got to help to kind of reshape this narrative that Black men aren't involved, because like you said before, the statistics prove that to be wrong and prove that to be a myth. But, you know, we got to come in and we got to be in people's faces to let people know that, hey, listen, we're involved and this is how this is going to read. This is how we're going to run this, and this is how we're going to do that or whatever. You know, come in, take over your PTA, you know, be extremely active or whatever. Change these, get in touch with these school leaders and make them change schedules to meet the needs of the parents and not the needs of themselves.
I mean, in some ways, we have to demand that the schools do more to know who they're dealing with. If a bunch of people didn't show up on a certain night, why?
Yeah. But the easy thing to do, and that's what I was talking about earlier. So the easiest thing to create is this utopic idea that they're not here because they don't care.
Yeah. And that becomes a very self-serving prophecy.
Absolutely. Because
then you can just write them off and not have to deal honestly with anything that might be going on with them. I mean, listen, man, if you are, I can remember the early years of being a dad and being involved in schools stuff with my oldest, with my son. And some of it was pretty positive. Like I had some people, I can remember some people in that journey that just were so good to me and good to Josh, good to my son in the process. So it wasn't like it was, you know, all nasty interactions, but you do remember the nasty ones, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
You like remember those are the ones. So anybody in customer service of any sort understands that the negative experiences that people have a powerful, they have a powerful memory for that stuff. And if I'm a person who has just spent all day long dealing with white world bullshit in my regular job, and then I come to your school at night for a meeting or something, and I encounter anything that reminds me of that or feels like that or looks like that, you got one good opportunity when you're not paying me to have me like live through that. I have to deal with it during the day because it's my job.
Yeah.
But if I show up at night and I see some of the same stuff, you know, you might see me once and then I'm out. Like, you know, it's deuces.
Chris, that's the problem, bro. When you show up at night, that's your job too.
It is your job, but it's not your job to suck down nonsense.
Not to suck down, not to suck down nonsense, but to call out the nonsense that they're asking you to suck down. Like you know, you don't just hear it and say, you know what, I'm not with this shit. I'm leaving. I have to deal with this too much at work. Nah, this is when you say, listen, this is the wrong message that you're sending. This is nonsense to me. You're not gonna come down to me. You're not gonna be condescending to me when you got my kid here. Because if you're talking to me this way, then what the hell are you doing for the 8 hours that you have my kid?
I mean, but roll with that, Ray. Like, roll with that for a minute. Keep going with this. So you're at a school, you're at that point of sale.
Yeah.
You have a moment where you know that your response to something stupid is about to be outsized with the situation. Like, it's going to be your response is going to be bigger than the situation you're dealing with because you got pent up stuff. You're simmering on the inside. You get sick of it. And it crosses your mind that whatever I do right now is going to be a problem for my child tomorrow. Like when they have to deal with this with my child when I'm not here.
Yeah.
So it's probably not in my best interest to do the thing I want to do, which is torch all this shit down. And
so that depends on how you raise your kid, and that depends on how your kid is built, right? Because like for me, with my son, it's like I know I could go the extra mile because I know who he is, and I know I know what bloodline runs through him to the point to where like, man, listen, if I sent you these emails that I send these folks, man, about things that don't happen at his school when they need to happen, and they know that coming from someone that has the ability to kind of activate my agency, my emails hit different than from somebody that is not able to do that. And so I kind of make sure that I'm speaking on behalf of those parents as well, so that it's not just, all right, well, we could be different to his kid. It's like, nah, you got to be different to all Black kids because this is what you're doing. This is a racist act. This is how I perceive it. This is how other parents perceive it. And don't make me get in touch with these other parents in order for us to come up there and do a sit-in.
I mean, I think that's a great point, though. That point is amazing because, if you like, if you're that person who can do that, you can write that email and you know how to do it. And you have the professional background or insight or whatever, the courage and the confidence. It's powerful because it puts them on notice. It also, though, creates a situation where you can help others.
Absolutely.
Right. Like if you bump into, because I know parents share information with each other all the time. I used to, it's how I found certain programs in certain schools. It was word of mouth. But if we had a problem, especially with things like, special ed or any of that type of stuff, people had answers for you. You could get better answers from other parents in some ways. But also, so this is the other trope. I forgot when I mentioned all those, what were those different, the different, so the different Black erasure memes are, we aren't capable leaders in education. We aren't involved parents. We aren't experts on our own children. And if we're demanding change within the system, it's only because we're either shills or pimps or greedy, or lacking of virtue in some way. Those are the things that I want to say are kind of the elements of Black male erasure in education. I'm going to add this other one based on what you just said. There's also the uppity Negro.
Yeah.
The uppity Negro is also a meme that they throw at you. I've had white teachers tell me I'm more down with Black people because I teach in a Black school with Black kids than you are. To which I gotta be like, and if people think I'm lying, I can give you names of people and receipts on the dumb shit that people say to me. Right. Like I have real ass children in these schools right now. These are people who are middle-aged, who don't have any kids in the system, who kids are long gone and white and went to college and doing all kinds of great things in lives. And in some cases, let's just be real. I keep saying white, but in some cases, just middle class, people of color too, who take on the role of the whites in these situations, right?
So I'm better than the whites. You better say it.
It's really true. It's really true. It's true. I mean, honestly, some of our own people have mastered the role that the whites play more than the whites do. In some cases, probably, if I'm just being real, I've had, like I said, some positive interactions in these same schools and systems with people. It's just that they're not powerful enough to be remembered if you're having these other negative situations where people are mischaracterizing your child, for instance. They're mislabeling your child. They're calling your child things that you know that your child is not. And you either have to suck it up or fight. You remember that more than you remember the positive things that some of the teachers have done.
It takes me back to the retail analogy the customer service analogy. It's like, you can go to a store 100 times and they can do amazing things every time you go in, but you're gonna remember that store for the one messed up racist thing that they did. You're not gonna say, all right, well, 99 other times they weren't racist. Nah, you're gonna be like, yo, they were racist this time.
That's a great point. Yeah. If you go to Nordstroms, which if you do, great for you because you got a good job. If you go to Nordstroms on a regular basis and you get that Nordstroms experience where they're just like pampering you with attention, and they have all the right information for you about anything that you're looking for, and they just want to get you to that point of sale where you buy something for too much money to impress people you don't like. That's cool, but the one time that you come in there and they racially profile you once is the last time you shop there.
The one time, shit.
Yeah, I mean, if you come in and you have a really bad experience or whatnot, all those other good experiences, sometimes I should say, I'm speaking generally, sometimes all those other, and it's the same in education. But the thing that we have to suck up as Black males in education is the fact that we know we're going to be sold short. We know that we're going to be under assessed or whatever you want to call it. We're not going to be given our full credit, our full due, and we have to still keep doing it.
Bro, you know what I would like to see? You know what I would like to see in some of these urban schools and some of these urban school districts, right? Is a Black male initiative in which you go in to these schools and you gather all these Black men, all these Black parents, whatever, especially Black men, and you meet with them and you talk to them about how they evolve, right? And the things that they want to do in terms of how they want to be engaged, and how they want the power dynamics to shift in your school. And I guarantee you're going to have a better school, because now you can call these parents and you're like, hey, listen, such was misbehaving or whatever. Can we come and collectively talk to him so that, he knows the meaningfulness of education or whatever. And those parents are going to be on board because you've already reached out to them to let them know that, hey, they mean something, right? And so now they're allies with you in this work. Right? And who doesn't want allies in this work? That's the most powerful part of the work, when I can call a parent and say, hey, I need your help, as opposed to calling a parent, being condescending, talking down to them, telling them what they need to do and how they need to parent. We don't look at these parents as experts, and I'm not okay with it.
And we don't look at them as partners in the process. We actually, and I shouldn't say we. Let's stop saying we when we're talking about dumb shit, because I don't do this, right? I don't do this, so I just I shouldn't be saying we. Like, we is a very powerful word. It includes you in some stuff you don't need to be included in. But the bottom line is, parents oftentimes are not treated as partners, and the schools that they have their kids in are trying to educate their kids in spite of them. Not with them or in help with them. And they will say everything about, listen, I've called your house multiple times. I get so many dead phone numbers, or, blah, blah. I hear that. I understand it. If you're an educator listening to me right now and you're thinking that I'm undermining the truth about how hard you've tried to get in touch with people you can't get in touch with, fine. Let's honor it. Yeah, I'm sure that happens in many cases. But the problem with you creating a stereotype out of your anecdotal experience in one place is then you start applying it to people that don't deserve it, right? And I know that a lot of people in my situation know for a fact that we're not absent or it can't be found or whatever. So if you treat me like that, now I know for a fact that you're generalizing too broadly.
That's the difference between a white educator making excuses and an educator that cares. And I'm gonna give you a perfect example, like how you're talking about the dead phone numbers. Yeah, they exist. Shit, people change jobs, people change cell phone carriers. Probably not enough outreach at schools in order to get the correct phone number or whatever. Because how many times you do that? You fill the emergency card out at the beginning of the year, but there aren't people that are going in and like saying, hey, let's revisit this, let's call and let's see if we got the right number or whatever. You're just assuming that it's going to be the right number. But there's a high chance that you got the right address. So if you can't get in contact with me on the phone, pull up. Pull up. Because that's what I used to do. I used to pull up. Like, hey, listen, I haven't been able to get in contact with you over the phone, but hey, I got to come to your house and we got to talk, because it's that your child's life is that important to me, to where I'm not going to let me not being able to get in contact with you over the phone be the staple in terms of me making an excuse to not be able to get in contact with you about your child. I owe that to you. I'm working with your child.
Right. And we're here for you. As we wrap, I will say this. There's a lot of people, Black males, that I've been doing some form of advocacy in education, at least for a decade or more. And there are Black males that I truly have learned from, have watched and watched just and absorbed things from them just by watching and seeing what they do. People that I respect a lot, and I continue to meet more. Some of them are in our comments right now. You are one of them. We have our 8 Black Hands cast. So we are a network of people that I keep growing year after year after year, of new people that I know and feel proud and privileged to know, because you're doing good work and good things and something I care about that I don't do, which is design schools, design classrooms, think about how Black children learn every morning and try it and fail and succeed and all that in the actual education process. And the number of those people that I respect and know and believe are amazing in this work, who have had some sort of altercation, some sort of situation, some sort of place that they got themselves into where they were being attacked by a group of either Twitter warriors or people in person, or an organized group of parents of privilege who wanted them to do something different than what they were doing. The number of people that I know that have encountered that form of attack is the majority. It's the majority of all those people I just mentioned. And I'm not going to name people and say what they dealt with, but I'm dealing with a situation right now, which I'm not going to speak a lot about. But random Karens can show up at any given time and give you a problem. And I can actually tell you that the majority of the people that I just mentioned have had that situation. And I'm tired. I'm just tired of it. I'm just sick of it. Do you have any final thoughts? If you have any final thoughts to people listening, this is a different type of show today. It comes out of a different place for me than what we normally talk about. And this isn't a softball topic, and it's not one that's going to end here. We're going to keep talking about this in some ways, but any final words from you? And I have a final thought.
Yeah. So bro, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Even though it's the day after Eva, and yeah. That's a hard act to follow right there. But yeah, if you're listening and you're in the comments or whatever, you follow Citizen Ed, or you follow 8 Black Hands podcast, shout out to the AOS podcast. It's a new podcast that's coming through our brand that focuses on the very issues that we're talking about today, Black male educators.
It's a good call out. And, if you're also interested with the 8 Black Hands Patreon account, if you go to that, you'll find behind that there are there's information and content that we don't have broadly shared, and including Dr. Charles Cole has just wrapped up an amazing book club and a topic that very few people knew about within Black education. And we have more of those to come. So visit us if you're listening. Ray, it's always good to talk to you, my brother. And, Charles was on recently. El Mekki will be on Friday. I think we're doing a good thing. I appreciate it. And I appreciate the fact that you and I have this shared experience. Like, we know with this topic that we talked about today, we know this very well. I want to end by saying this. Black men and Black fathers are real. We are present. We exist. It is part of our identity. When you think of the Black male identity, if you don't think of a good Black father, interrogate yourself, rethink yourself, maybe be quiet for a while, go into a quiet room, don't talk. Don't think about anything else. Don't share any thoughts or opinions going through your mind until you get right with your diversity Jesus on this one, because we exist. And we should stop encountering nonsensical attacks from people that don't have the history that we have. The CDC in their studies show that Black male fathers are actually the most involved fathers of all racial groups when they are actually in the lives of their children. And the majority of Black males are in the lives of their children. The majority of Black children are not fatherless, and we are not invisible or erasable. And one thing about what you said, Ray, about engagement from the school level, I think is important. I'm going to share this story real quick here. You've seen these type of stories before often. When Dallas schools said that made a call for volunteers for dads, stand-in dads to show up. 600 men showed up, 600 fathers. You look at the picture there, it's mostly Black people, right?
Yeah,
showing up, 600.
Yeah.
You've seen this story more than one time. There's a call put out for 50 people and hundreds of people show up, right?
Absolutely.
Black males of every walk in life and stripe. Educated people and people who want to call themselves progressive have to stop erasing these people, have to stop acting as if they don't exist and are invisible. And that's today's message. With that, it's a wrap. I appreciate you, Ray. I appreciate the audience for listening to me today and let me go off on my little rant for today. If you were here and you didn't like what I had to say today, there are many other broadcasts on Facebook for you to check out, and I can give you a list of them. If you think that it's wrong for us to say the things that we're saying right now and to talk about it, I have in my basement, I have a lot of seats, and you can have all of them. I'll give you as many of them as you want. I'll ship them to you by UPS. You can put them in your room, and you can take as many of them as you want. And again, for those who didn't feel those things, who have showed up here and made great comments, I love you. I appreciate those who are supportive. Don't have to agree with me all the time, but you're supportive and you contribute to the show being good. So thank you all. Ray, thanks again, brother. I appreciate you, man.
No doubt. Peace.